να κατεβάζει οτιδήποτε πληροφορίες χρειάζεται από όλο τον κόσμο. Είναι 0. Είναι ο χρόνος ο δικός του. Είναι ξέρω εγώ, τα 500 ευρώ που χρειάζεται για να αγοράσει το λάπταπ. Που σημαίνει ότι και ο πιο αδύνατος της κοινωνίας μας μπορεί να έχει πρόσβαση και να επισέλθει σε τεχνολογικά συστήματα και να κάνει γρήγορη πρόοδο.
Απαντήστε μου όμως σε κάτι, σας παρακαλώ, γιατί έχει πολύ μεγάλη σημασία να ξέρουμε αν θα περιμένουμε να δούμε κάτι από τα χέρια Ελλήνων ερευνητών, όχι απαραίτητα στον ηλεκτρονικό υπολογιστή, στο προσεχές ή στο πιο μακρινό μέλλον. Έχουμε κάτι στη φαρέτρα αυτή τη στιγμή που είναι σε ένα εξελισσόμενο ερευνητικό πρόγραμμα και θεωρείτε ότι θα έχει αποτέλεσμα?
Να σας πω δύο παραδείγματα. Προ λίγων μηνών έγινε μια τελετή για τα 10 χρόνια του Ιατροβιολογικού Ινστιτούτου της Ακαδημίας Αθηνών. Είχαν κάνει μια πρωτοποριακή εργασία για μια πρωτεΐνη η οποία έχει σχέση με το Alzheimer's, αυτή την ασθένεια.
Την νόσο δηλαδή που λέμε ότι ξεχνάει κανείς. Ναι.
Βέβαια. Η οποία θα είναι και η νόσος του μέλλοντος για όλο τον κόσμο. Καθώς περνάει η ηλικία μας, αυτό είναι ένα γεγονός.
Και το περιβάλλον παίζει ρόλο, να το πούμε και αυτό. Ναι,
αλλά η θεραπεία είναι το θέμα. Έκαναν μια ανακάλυψη για μια πρωτεΐνη για την οποία πήραν ένα δίπλωμα ευρεσιτεχνίας και κατευθείαν μια από τις πιο μεγάλες εταιρείες, φαρμακευτικές εταιρείες, ζήτησε να κάνουν μια συνεργασία για να προσπαθήσουν να φέρουν ένα φάρμακο στην αγορά. Αυτό έγινε στην Ελλάδα.
Ποιας προέλευσης είναι αυτή η εταιρεία, μπορείτε να το πείτε, ή είναι κάτι...
Δεν σας πω, θα το έλεγα, αλλά δεν θυμάμαι ακριβώς. Αλλά πιθανόν να ήταν και η Glaxo...
Γνωστές φαρμακοβιομηχανίες ή πολυεθνικές.
Έκαναν μια παρόμοια εργασία για το Parkinson's, αυτή την ασθένεια η οποία υπάρχει, αυτή τη μούλα. Λοιπόν, αυτά έγιναν στη χώρα μας και έγιναν από ερευνητές οι έκαναν προτάσεις για ερευνητικά κονδύλια στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Πήραν τα χρήματα, έκαναν την έρευνα τους. Βέβαια, εκ των υστέρων άκουσα ότι αυτοί ειδικά οι δύο ερευνητές τους προσφέρθηκαν θέσεις στο εξωτερικό με τριπλάσιους και πενταπλάσιους μισθούς και έχουν φύγει ή θα φύγουν. Αλλά θέλω να σας πω ότι αυτό που έχουμε διασπιστώσει στο Εθνικό Συμβούλιο Έρευνας και Τεχνολογίας είναι ότι υπάρχουν νησίδες αριστείας, επιστημονικής αριστείας, όχι μόνο στη βιολογία, αλλά και στις ηλεκτρονικές επιστήμες, στη χημική μηχανική, στη μαθηματικά, οι οποίες εάν χρηματοδοτηθούν και χειριστούν σωστά, θα είναι η αρχή της επανάστασης για την επανάκαμψη της οικονομίας της Ελλάδος. Αλλά, όπως είπε ο κ. Καράκης προηγουμένως, χρειαζόμαστε την πολιτική στην προκειμένη περίπτωση. Εάν οι πολιτικοί αρνούνται να υποστηρίξουν την τεχνολογία για την ανάπτυξη της χώρας και προτιμούν να δώσουν επιδόματα, ξέρω εγώ, στους οποιουσδήποτε, εάν υπάρχουν αυτές οι εναλλακτικές λύσεις, τότε είναι θέμα πολιτικό, δεν είναι θέμα τεχνολογικό.
Λοιπόν, νομίζω ότι είναι κατάλληλη στιγμή, γιατί βάλατε ένα πολύ σημαντικό θέμα και οι τρεις σας σε ό,τι αφορά την παρέμβαση πολιτικής στο θέμα της τεχνολογίας και πώς αυτή μπορεί να χρησιμοποιηθεί. Θέλω να περάσουμε σε ένα ρεπορτάζ όπου μας μιλάει ο κ. Ben Hammersley. Είναι ένας άνθρωπος ο οποίος ασχολείται ιδιαίτερα με τις εξελίξεις τις τεχνολογικές, αλλά κυρίως τις κοινωνικές που θα εφέρει η τεχνολογία στον άνθρωπο. Και έχει πολύ σημασία να ακούσουμε αυτά τα οποία λέει, γιατί εστιάζει ακριβώς στο πώς η τεχνολογία θα μπορέσει να γίνει αντικείμενο είτε εκμετάλλευσης, είτε ένα όπλο από τους αδύνατους προς τους δυνατούς. Να το δούμε.
There's a quote from the science fiction writer William Gibson, and he says that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. I think there are two things you need to understand if you're trying to most important things you have to understand if you're trying to understand the future, if you're trying to predict what's going to happen in the next few years. The first one is about computing power itself. There is a rule of thumb that's called Moore's law, which is a thing that says that for the same price, computing power doubles every 12 to 18 months. So roughly every year, for the same amount of money, computing power doubles. Or for the same amount of computing power, the price halves. It's the doubling section of that that's most important. That something today, which will be 1, will double next year to 2, or then 4, then 8, 16, 32, 64, which means that in a very short period of time, the increase in computing power that we have means is so huge that we can't really imagine what we'll be able to do. 30 years ago, the amount of computing power that you have in your phone today has the same power as the biggest supercomputer that we had 30 years ago. You are carrying around in your pocket the equivalent of the computing power that could put a man on the moon. If you went back in time 10 years, you would have been before Twitter, before Facebook, before YouTube, before the iPhone, before the iPad, before pretty much all of the modern internet. And we couldn't have imagined what today was like. And that was only 10 years ago. So to look forward 20 years, the only sane thing we can say, and this is very important, I think this is the most important thing, the only sane thing that we can say is that the future is going to be so weird we can't possibly imagine it. And if you plan your future, if you make decisions based on future weirdness and future uncertainty, then you're having a much more sane reaction to the modern world than if you plan your future that everything will be the same, only with a few more gadgets. Because the whole world has changed. And I think one of the things that's been really shown over the past 10 years, and certainly over the past 2 or 3 years, is the fundamental additional capability that the internet gives us is the ability to form groups of interest. It's the ability to form communities based not around geography. You'd be friends with the people who lived on your street or something like that, but communities around people who are interested in the same thing. And that ability to form groups and to form networks that can get something done, regardless of geography, which is driven by this technology. That ability to form groups is the thing that is really driving modern society. And we're seeing that in Greece, we're seeing that in Spain, in Italy, in Turkey this week, in Brazil. We're seeing it everywhere. This ability to gather people together as a loose network of people, all with the same interest, is new and very exciting, and also very terrifying if you're somebody from a generation who doesn't understand that. Then you have a very special class of computer illiterate people, which are the very senior people, the older, senior executives, senior politicians, and so on, who are completely mystified by and threatened by the capabilities that the internet gives the average person on the street. What we're seeing across Europe, especially, is a shift from a very hierarchical society. Very important people at the top, and then people come down. And in every institution, whether you're talking about politics or the military or academia or business or just society in general, a pyramid shape. But what the internet gives us is a network, is just a cloud, it's just a blob with nobody in charge and nobody, being, no masters, no slaves, everybody mixing in together and the connections forming very quickly and then disappearing and forming again and disappearing. And for young people who are, in general, for younger people who are digitally literate and who have grown up like this, those loosely connected networks is a perfectly natural thing, and the hierarchies are really weird. But for the elder people, the hierarchies are the natural thing, and the networks are really weird. And what we're seeing across Europe now is the conflict between networks and hierarchies. And the hierarchies, sadly, are the people who run the banks and have the armies, and the police and so on. But the networks are, by definition, stronger and will win.
Are you actually referring to a shift to a communication model from top to bottom, from the top to the base, and then uttering this from bottom to top, where the many become the communicators rather than the receivers?
Exactly, indeed. Actually, what I'm talking about is a shift from not from top to bottom, shifting to bottom to top, but what we're seeing is a shift from top to bottom sort of goes away, and the bottom kind of ignores the top.
Okay.
So it's bottom to bottom. If you see what I mean?
I see.
You know, it's
the
sideways.
Same level.
It's at the same level, exactly. And because we realize once we start to understand this network, and we realize the interconnectedness of everything, that the people that we thought were at the top really aren't at the top, and are sort of irrelevant. And so they're only relevant because they're at the top. But once you stop playing that game, you know, once you stop paying attention to top and bottom, then they become pointless. And so you just talk amongst your friends, you know, or you talk amongst your network. And so we're seeing in many countries a situation where the people who thought they were at the top suddenly realize that they're powerless and they're ruling nothing.
Do you think that there's going to be a revolutionary model, if you like, around the world in the next 20 years based on this particular model of communication and social interaction?
Yes, and we've already seen it, right? We've already seen it in the Middle East, in the Arab Spring. We're going to be seeing it, I'm sure, this summer with, you know, Occupy and all of those sort of protests. I mean, they will come back again this summer, undoubtedly.
But it actually seems to be like a trend which comes and goes from time to time.
I think the thing that is misunderstood about Occupy and a lot of those other protests, specifically misunderstood by politicians, by mainstream hierarchical politicians at the moment, is that it was always the same criticism. You would hear the same criticism every time, which was Occupy or a group would campaign against capitalism or campaign against the Troika or, you know, whoever. You know, they would be against something.
Yeah.
And then the people would say, well, but what? Okay, fine, you're against that. What do you stand for? What are your proposals? You know, what are your ideas? And Occupy and all those groups would have many, many, many different ideas, all of which would be completely contrasting to each other. They would have they lack an ideology, right? They have no concrete proposals,
or they lack identity as well.
And they lack identity. Now, this to the existing hierarchical thinking is their great weakness, because the current politicians say, look, how can you have a revolution if you don't even have a manifesto, right? How can anybody support you if you have nothing to say other than no more of the current thing, right? Now, what the Occupy movement would say if they spoke with one voice, but what they would say is, look, in a world where change is so rapid and where things are so uncertain and where no one is really in charge, and when Moore's Law and all of those other things push change so quickly, having a set ideology is itself insane. Because a set ideology, a set group of policies is yesterday's reaction to last year's problem.
Right.
Whereas what Occupy would say is, the importance isn't to come to a conclusion. The importance is to keep having the conversation.